My name is Rebecca Hunter. I'm president and CEO of Geiger Energy, a new company that formed with the merger of Baslode Energy and Forum Energy. And we're a uranium exploration company that focuses mainly in Nunavut, and as well as the Saskatchewan, looking for uranium.
Rebecca, lovely to meet you. And obviously, the company is new to us, but we do know part of the business. You can merge with Baseload recently, and we've got to get that over the line, obviously. But I always like to get to know the people. So, where are you from, Rebecca? What have you done, and how's that relevant to what you're doing today?
So I'm an exploration geologist at heart. So I was born and raised in Saskatchewan and was quickly brought into the uranium industry as a student even, and then as a geologist. And so I actually, a large part of my exploration tenure was at Cameco Corporation. So I spent 11 years working at Cameco in their exploration department. And for the majority of that, I spent leading their Thelon project back in the last cycle, pre-Fukushima, when Cameco was looking for uranium deposits all over the world. And one of the places they spent a lot of time looking was the Dual-Basin. So that's a big part of my tenure. And then I left, did some government. I did a PhD on basically the data of the Thelon project, because we collected so much during that kind of ramp up, from 2005 to 2012. We did a lot of exploration. I made it into a thesis. I did that for a while, and then I came back and started exploring.
Okay, right. Another Cameco alumni out there running companies. That's good. The kind of the merger of Forum and Baseload obviously being brought together in the shape of Geiger. It'd be good to kind of understand the kind of setup there in terms of the kind of cash position, who's doing what on the team, and I guess ultimately, what are you setting out to try to do or be?
So I think it comes down to, kind of bigger is better. So we had two companies, struggling a bit on our own, and Forum, had a big vision for the Thelon. Baseload had a vision for looking for these shallow deposits, high impact deposits in the Athabasca Basin. So we came together earlier this year because we kind of both needed that, rejuvenation essentially. And so we came together. Took a few months, and what's really exciting about Baseload, what I was really encouraged about, going through the merger with them is their vision too. And so we both recognize that the Thelon Basin, and that's our flagship, is a tier one project. That's overused, but it has that potential to host really large deposits. And so we wanted to bring our companies together and advance that project primarily.
Right, and like I say, in terms of bigger is better, bigger is beautiful. Where do you find yourself with cash to be able to do what you need to do? Are you okay with money?
Baseload brought 10 million into that deal, so that was the big component that helped us advance. And then we did another raise during the merger process. We raised another 6 million. So by the time we're done with our exploration program this summer and the transaction costs, we'll have about 6 million still in the bank to go towards, projects in the winter like Lee Hook, and advancing our Aberdeen as well.
Right. Okay. So let's look at what you've got. Obviously, you've got a couple of projects going to get focused on. Just trying to understand the priority. Aberdeen, obviously, and Akio. So what takes priority?
Aberdeen's the flagship for sure, and so but for the winter. One thing about the Aberdeen project is we can only work in the summer. So we have kind of that 4-month, 5-month window in the summer to do work. So that's passed now. So we finished our exploration about a week ago in Aberdeen. And so the winter, so in order to kind of keep news flow and also advance, another high priority project for Geiger, we'll do Hook Akio this winter.
Okay, and so what can you tell us? Obviously, the Loki discovery kind of shows that unconformity style mineralization. What are the kind of tell us what you can about the actual project, if you don't mind.
In general, the project is it's right beside Orano's. Orano has already a deposit there, so they have about 133 million pounds that they're sitting on. It's kind of in their pipeline, but not in their immediate pipeline. And we have this project that Cameco owned back in the day, and I was a part of exploring that. And so we have all the property around it. So right along trend, although the fertile trends that host those similar type of basement host deposits we have. And then the Loki discovery, what's exciting about the Loki discovery is that one thing I didn't get to back in the Cameco days was looking for those kind of standard unconformity deposits with the sandstone still intact. So the deposits found today are all basement hosted. So that's the Kigavik deposits, what Orano has. The discoveries that I made with my team back in the Cameco days, those were also basement hosted. But a lot of our property still has sandstone cover or sandstone outliers, and there's this potential for the actual kind of unconformity where it's right at the contact. So all the big deposits in the Athabasca, MacArthur, Cigar, the Canalaska's project right now where they're drilling the Pike deposit or Pike zone, that is that unconformity type right at the contact, big deposits. And so there's all this potential on the Aberdeen project as well that we never tested back in the day, or very little. So one of the big initiatives is to get onto our property and look for those types as well, because those can be the big payout. Those can be the big types of deposits. And what's exciting about the Loki deposit is it has sandstone. Last year we drilled it. It had just a little bit of elevated uranium in the sandstone, so we were excited. And then this year we drilled it, found even more elevated uranium in the sandstone and mineralization at the unconformity.
I understand you've intersected some strong alteration over a kind of decent distance there. What are the kind of alteration minerals that dominate? And I guess given your Cameco background, how do they compare to unconformity systems like MacArthur or Cigar?
So the alteration is essentially just clay, and so
Okay.
and there's different types of clay, and they have different chemical compositions. And so the clay that we have is typically, it's called illite, doesn't matter. It's a potassium clay, and that's the same types of clay that are basically above the deposits in the Athabasca Basin. So it's at lots of clay, which also can make the drilling very difficult. And what we call bleaching, which is just a lot of the sandstone. Like if a sandstone is just uninteresting, just normal rock, it's these types of systems, it's usually very red. So it has a very red color. And when that red color gets stripped and the sand takes on a very white color, that's very interesting and is what we see above those kind of big deposits in the Athabasca Basin.
Right.
And that's what we're seeing en masse at Loki as well.
And are you seeing any of this kind of post-basin structural reactivation? And what does that mean in terms of kind of fluid pathways for the uranium?
That's all tied into it. So yeah, in order to basically deposit uranium deposit, you need to have movement of fault zones. And then when you see that fracturing or that broken up nature in the sandstone, then you know that that fault movement has happened. And then if that fault movement has happened, then deposits potentially have formed. And so the Loki has the same type of thing. So the pictures that I've shown in some of the little video I did a few weeks ago, kind of talking about Loki, all that broken up stuff, that's exactly what you want to see in these areas.
Right. So when you're looking at that kind of unconformity horizon, how do you get a sense of the scale of the potential? With you've been doing some drilling recently, and you're obviously looking to show that continuity. So maybe it might be worth sort of talking about the type of targeting that you've been doing, the type of drilling that you've been doing, and what you're finding.
So yeah, it's a lot of clue seeking, and so I've kind of taken projects from very, very early stage, and so sometimes what you see is very subtle. So you'll get the sandstone, and it's mostly all red. But then there'll be a few zones that are white bleached. So you look at that and you'd be like, okay, well, maybe there's some smaller structures coming through here, and so that the fluids are moving. You're still going to be hundreds or kilometer away from maybe a deposit, but it's showing you that you have some of that sort of interesting fluids moving through the area that can help you kind of vector in, as we say. And so when you get lots of it. And so what's super encouraging about Loki and several of our trends, Loki is not the only one, um, is that the whole sandstone column is white, or it's significantly white, or there's tons of clay, or there's another alteration type that we look for as well. It's called the sooty sulfide. It's what reduces and what kind of basically traps the uranium. We get that in there as well, and so it's all those types of clues, and the more it's bleached, the more sulfide you got there, then you can say, well, maybe you're 100 meters, maybe you're 50 meters, or maybe you're even 10 meters from something much more interesting.
So how do you plan you're going to follow up drilling off the back of what you're saying?
A lot of tight space drilling. One of the problems with when you get really broken up, messed up core is it's really hard to figure out kind of the orientation of where the faults are going. Like we use methods when we collect the core to help us find out kind of what orientations we can chase, like which way, north, south, east, west. But when it's all messed up, it's really hard. And so then you kind of just have to step out, and it's tricky with unconforming deposits because they can be very narrow. And I highlighted that in that one little presentation I made, that McArthur River is a great example where it can be as narrow as 12 meters wide. And this is the largest deposit in the world, uranium deposit of that sort in the world. And so you can step around that. You do 50-meter step outs and you've missed it. You could be right there and miss it. And so it's really tricky. So the step outs, that's a great question. We kind of, you want to cover an area so that you actually can test, but sometimes the step outs are, 12 meters, and so that's, I think, what we need to do at Loki is do some pretty narrow steps in that alteration area to make sure that if there's something there, we actually hit it.
Yeah, 12-meter step outs. Okay. But because I think so generally, so the Thelon Basin is sort of not known by many, but for those who do know it, sort of describes as underexplored analog to the Athabasca. In terms of, do you see much in terms of the geological differences that may affect sort of grade or tonnage potential in that sense, given what you've just said?
Yeah, I mean there's differences. So I think as far as the grade tonnage potential, I think that's just unknown. All these types of deposits, even in the Athabasca, there's differences in the geology, and you still, you've got Cigar MacArthur, you get those types of incredible deposits. You got Arrow, it's very different. And so even in the Athabasca, there's lots of nuances, and you still can get big deposits. And so in the Thelon, I still believe that we can get huge amounts of tonnage in deposits that can be discovered up there, but they will look different. And so the main difference being is we don't have graphite. And so you'll hear that a lot in the Athabasca Basin, that you've got the graphite conductors. That's the way they target. And so that's the big difference in the Thelon is we can't use EM because there's no graphite. So we're not going to light up the faults that way. So we use different methods. So magnetics, resistivity, those types of methods help us figure out the faults. And all the graphite, all that EM conductor, all it is telling you where the fault is. And so we just use a different method for that. And then if you notice a lot of my talks, and I talk a lot about gravity, and that's the method that we use to basically see the clay alteration envelopes that potentially are around deposits.
Right. Okay. Interesting. I say, and I will go and watch some of these videos. And I guess anyone watching this or listening to this should go and watch some of those educational videos as well. Just if I may, then, you've got two companies come together. Bigger is better, as you say earlier on. But and you've got a bunch of cash in the bank at the moment. But the market for uranium companies has been sort of a quite erratic ride. It's generally trending up, but nevertheless erratic. And some companies are getting rewarded for different activities. For you, what is your kind of long-term strategy in terms of explaining and unlocking the district scale value at Aberdeen? You've got a lot of targets. You've got 50 plus targets, so you got to be efficient. So what do you think people should be looking at? What will you be spending your time doing?
I think, we have a big vision. And so I think the biggest value we can bring to shareholders is that in order to make discoveries and to gain that value is that you need a good project. And so you can have a lot of projects in the Athabasca Basin that aren't going to do anything for you. What you need is a project that has the potential not only to make very large discoveries, but also has that kind of pipeline trajectory where that those discoveries could be something bigger down the road, you know. And so to me, it's a no-brainer that the Thelon Basin is the place you should be. That's where I want to be, and I think that's where big discoveries will be made because you not only have it's just wide open for discoveries. It has all the right geology to form deposits. We already know there's deposits there, deposits that not only that we have, that we can expand, the deposits that Orano has, and so we know that it has that potential. So it's just getting the capital, getting the time to figure out which trends are the most fertile, drilling them off like Loki. We know that Loki has, you know, crazy amount of alteration. It has that first evidence of unconformity mineralization, which that in of itself is a game changer because now it's possible. Up until this point, you know, it's kind of like there's only been kind of basement hosted deposits found. And so, you know, some people are like, well, is it there? You know, maybe this area of the world doesn't have that potential to have these crazy deposits at the unconformity. And I think what Loki shows is that it can. We have the alterations there, the mineralization is there. It's just now finding it at the appropriate scale. That's what, you know, the vision I have for Geiger is to advance a project that has the potential to host something big. And if it can host something big, we can make incredible returns for shareholders.
Okay. Well, I'm going to ask you a question which I'll ask one of your other peers who are also in the Thelon Basin, which is the kind of preconceived view of what it's like doing business up in Nunavut. So in terms of logistical or climatic constraints and how it affects your drill program design or budget assumptions, and can you talk to that?
So yeah, it's true that, you know, we can't drill all year round. So, but we can do a good season in the summer. So we kind of have that end of May to end of September season. So you got a good 4-month window. But as far as doing anything in the winter, yeah, it's more complicated. You can mine in the winter. So there's gold mines. Agnico has 2 active gold mines, and so that's not a problem. Once you have roads and have that critical infrastructure, then you can. It's no different working up there than it is in northern Saskatchewan. It's basically the same temperature. There's just no trees. But that to just keep that in mind. But if you have enough exploration that you can do in the summer, you know, if you have enough drills, we're testing a lot of shallow targets, so that's one of the components. So we're not drilling at a kilometer. The trends, the deepest that we have is about 400, 500 meters, and most of our targets, like Loki, for instance, the unconformity is at 160 meters. And so you can test a lot of targets and you can potentially discover zones that are at incredible shallow depths and stuff like that. So yeah, there's challenges, but there's also huge upsides with regard to the logistics and the setting.
Right. Okay. Yep. Like I say, we're very enthusiastic about the Thelon Basin, so you know, support what you just said. Right, you're okay, we're going to have to jump over to Accio now, okay? And I appreciate you're obviously been on a learning curve there, but maybe if you don't mind giving us over before I ask some questions on it, give us an overview of, you know, what the Accio project is and where it's at the moment.
So it actually is pretty neat because it has a lot of similarities to the Thelon in the way that, again, there's no conductors. So again, it's a little bit different kind of basement geology from in the Athabasca Basin where there's no kind of EM conductor. So they use very similar geophysical methods that we do, which is the gravity. It's kind of honing into those clay alteration envelopes and then drilling them. And so you've got the Accio discovery, and so and then you got the overall Hook project, which kind of encapsulates it. So what we're thinking of doing this winter is James and the team previous came up with some really good targets on the Hook project, so outside of the main Accio zone, that had really good alteration, that had 10s to I think 100 meters of of clay alteration or interesting kind of alteration. And so we're going to go in there and test some of those targets that James came up with.
Okay, I mean, but tell me exactly where Accio is in terms of stage of development compared to Aberdeen.
So it's an exploration project, same kind of deal, less scale. So the Aberdeen project just has so many targets. So the Hook Accio is one. So that's a difference. But exploration stage, they have the mineralization. So it's kind of like our Tatagat Kavik. So we've got mineralization, and then they have some really neat alteration that they haven't followed up, kind of outboard of that Accio discovery. And so what we'd like to do this winter is get in there. James has a great plan with the team prior to me joining, and so they have that really nice alteration. It looks really prospective, and so we'll go in there and drill, up to 5,000 meters. They have some really good targets, and we'll test that alteration and see if we can make that Accio discovery even bigger.
And so, and in terms of prioritization, in terms of seasonality, in terms of allocating dollars to drilling, I mean, what can you tell us about what your plans are at Accio?
Essentially, it's our winter program. So because we can't explore the Aberdeen in the winter, Accio is like the perfect project for us to advance in the winter. So it gives us that really great optionality and keeps our news flow going. And they're both, really good high priority projects.
Right, and it's obviously a little bit shallower as well. Does that help?
Yeah, and again, it's the same thing as we're doing in the Aberdeen. We're looking for shallow targets. Some of the clay alteration might be a bit deeper in the Hook proper, but with still yet to be determined.
Right. Okay. And is there any sort of here, in terms of hydrological work, in trying to understand the kind of the water component, which is Athabasca Basin sometimes suffers from, and how much work's been done to sort of understand the potential going forward post drilling?
At Hook Accio, I mean, it's basement hosted stuff, so that stuff is just a lot tighter. In the Thelon, so one of the advantages you have working up in the Arctic is that there's permafrost, and that permafrost layer goes down to, 200, 300 meters. And so a lot of the areas that we're targeting, most of our drill targets are under 250 meters, and they're well within that kind of natural freeze wall.
Right. Okay. I guess with Accio, so I'm trying to remember back to the conversations with James in terms of modelling this. Is it being sort of modelled with in the sense that there's kind of multiple shallow pods, or do these kind of get when you do? Yeah. What are you envisaging finding? I think.
Yeah, well, it has those multiple pods, and so they have these like several pods. They're all very shallow. I think some of it's 30 meters down, sort of thing. So, and then it's basement hosted sort of system. So they're kind of tight, structurally like fault hosted little zones that are very steeply dipping. And so you got multiple stuff like that going on. So even depth extent down the road, maybe there is deeper systems to this, because you obviously have some sort of mineralized system here, and so there's expandability potentially, but then you start getting into deeper zones, and then it's like, well, the economics of that changes. And so I think that's also the reason to look at these areas in the Hook proper, because you've got some shallower targets, you've got this crazy alteration. Kind of want to chase up that and see what's going on there.
Right. Okay. So it sounds like these are sort of hand in glove. They fit quite nicely together in terms of the workload seasonally. And you've got the money to get after it now. Can I just look at a little sort of step back and sort of look at the kind of broader market with the team? You said James is sort of still helping out on the ground, but what's the new team look like? It's in terms of market facing, in terms of technical, in terms of anything else that you think you need to have in place to kind of advance this new company.
Yeah, so we're in the middle of kind of merging basically two cultures and two teams, and so I'm lucky that I got to bring along my whole technical team. So a good geo, and then a logistics team. So a lot of the work in Nunavut, you're doing all this crazy stuff. It's all helicopter supported. We do these overland snow trains and all this sort of stuff, and building a camp and all this sort of stuff. So having a logistics team that knows Nunavut, knows these kind of remote locations. So I've got them involved, and then I've acquired, Baslode's two geologists, and they're very good, like on the ground sort of geos. And so we're kind of meshing that team. We still have to get a VP, so we've kind of just set that aside until the merger is complete. But this fall, need to bring on somebody, like I think a very strong technical, passionate geologist that can take on these projects, and especially the Thelon project. Again, you have to think outside the box. It's a different area. The geology is a little different, and so you can't just take that Athabasca model and slap it down and hope for the best. You got to kind of understand those nuances and be a real kind of exploration geologist. So I'm looking, I need that as well. So the team needs to grow a bit. And as far as the forward facing, so I mean, I'll be, the face of the marketing, stuff like that for now. And I'm the one who can really bring this forward because of my experience in the Thelon already, and kind of the vision I have for Geiger, focused, good geological exploration, and with that should come lots of discoveries, and with that should come lots of shareholder value.
Yeah, for sure. When you can see, again, stepping back and looking at what the market wants and what it's rewarding, we've been back in this space for 6-7 years now, and it's been quite an interesting ride. The advanced development companies seem to be getting rewarded, for sure. Not a lot of them. Exploration companies not quite getting rewarded yet. What's it going to take? What do you need to kind of lay out to the market, whether it be in your marketing or to the finance guys, to say, look, we're building something good here. These are the right things to be focused on. These are the right things that you should be looking at and rewarding. Is it purely drilling? Is it purely discovery, or is there more to it?
I think, yeah, that's a good question. Like I want to build a company here, and so we're right at the bottom essentially, and yeah, it's discovery, but you want to make discoveries that have that pipeline trajectory where it can actually be big enough and important enough to really bring value. And so that kind of comes back to my, you want to pick one or two really good projects that have that capability. And so for us, the Aberdeen project is that. We've got a whole district basically to ourselves with really good ground where we think that we can find one of these high tonnage, high grade discoveries. And so that's important. Focus, and also focusing on that. So not a lot of companies, they kind of ambulance chase, or they kind of, like move, and to really pick a good project and then stick with it. And results will come. And so getting that out to, investors is, there needs to be a bit of patience. It can be a horrible market, and, with the ups and downs, it can be really hard for investors to stick with it. But I think in our case, the prize is extremely big. And we just need to stick to it and make those discoveries. And I think the shareholder value will move with that. By doing that.